So tell me how you're doing. Tell me what you're noticing. That's actually my favorite thing is to just hear what you're noticing. Happy to answer questions. So let's see, Doug.
Um, Meditation is generally fine for me. I'm actually almost too into it.
Uh-huh.
It's a great relief
What,
from
what does
life.
that mean?
It means it's a relief from life.
It's a
I
relief
can
from life. Yeah.
I can go inward instead of being in that place where I feel the tensions, I feel the whatever they are, the negative thoughts, and I can't really be with them when
Yeah.
I sit or when I do a real focused, even a walk. I can be with them, and they do that kind of shift you're talking about,
Hmm.
or that I experience. So there is that place of how do I do that when I'm not on the cushion?
Good
Um,
question. Yeah.
maybe that should be that question. I was going to go somewhere else, but maybe
Well,
that
why don't
should
you
be
go somewhere else and we'll come back to the question because the question's really good, but you were holding something else.
the other question. Really is that I do a lot with body posture and position,
Hmm.
and thinking of my head being pulled up by the string, and you know, putting my tongue on the roof of my mouth, and it's clearly skillful for my body. I can sit longer, and back pain goes away, um, and I'm often kind of playing with, do I really work with that and make that a focus, or do I just go with the tensions, let myself kind of pull forward? Because it's a little bit of effort to kind of keep remembering and counteracting the kind of automatic tightening of the face, tightening of the chest, and I'm kind of yeah, so there's a skillful means in there which I just play with, and I'm not really sure
Uh-huh.
always which way to go.
Yeah.
So that's the
Well, you know, let's begin with there's not a correct answer of which way to go. But one possibility, you could explore what that is. In other words, if you kind of do this mindlessly, what would it be to actually explore it with mindfulness? Like, what is this? Or sometimes I ask, who is this? Who is I mean, there's the Doug who sits up straight and is careful with the posture and is trying to be skillful about the body. Who is this? And enter into that. Um, and enter into that with a real felt sense. In other words, I'm not asking you an intellectual question. Who is this? I don't want you to tell me the story of your life or, you know, but in an embodied way. You see, you mentioned something too about your face. Your face gets kind of serious or drawn. I forget the word that you used, but
tight
tight. Yeah.
or is tight.
Just to enter into that more fully with curiosity and like, what is that? What is the tightness? What's the energy there? Is there a feeling? Is there an emotion? And again, don't go down the thought train of trying to explain it. Just be open to like the experience of yourself this way. Um, and see where that goes. So that's a choice. That's a possible like inquiry that you could do around that. It'll be difficult because generally these sorts of patterns involve going unconscious. You know, but that's part of the promise of making them conscious. It's part of the promise of really getting in there with curiosity as to who is this, what is this that takes me over. The stance. It's a stance in the body. All right. So back to your other question, like, I mean, what you're describing is kind of the spiritual person's aversion to life. you know, Once you get a taste of tranquility, you get a taste of meditation. Maybe you go on some intensive silent retreats and people cook for you and do everything, and you can just be there and meditate. It's a little kind of a hothouse plant that you become. You want to be in the hothouse where it's warm and humid and the bugs don't eat you and the wind doesn't whip you around. And then you kind of come out into life, and life's kind of harsh, and life's kind of coming at you really fast, coming at you really fast. And it's harder to be mindful. It's harder to be mindful. I think it's really, however, really important to bring that mindfulness to your life. And it starts with intention. It starts with resolve, an intention that has real resolve behind it, to like wake up in your life, and to carry that same sort of care and attention that you would in a sitting practice in some way into your life. Now, I know things are happening fast. There's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of things to react to. It's messy. It's messy. So you have to accept what you can do. You can only do what you can do. But that intention, that with some resolve, pays off. Years ago, I haven't really talked this way for a long time, but I used to talk about seamless practice, how to make your practice seamless, because we're talking about the seams that we've created between meditation and life. We've created a kind of a separation. So what would it be not to do that? And so you like meditating. Okay, that's just liking. Really, it's just liking. There might be kind of the mind story about that, it's a good thing to do for myself and so forth. But it's really liking. But I'll speak a little bit autobiographically. If you're a sensitive person, life is kind of assaulting you all the time. There's suffering there. And so part of seamless practice is to actually turn towards the suffering of life as it is and see if you can feel its unpleasantness the same way I was instructing you to feel the unpleasantness in your body, the ache and the itch. Actually feel the unpleasantness of having to rush. There's an actual unpleasantness to it, except when there's not, because I've rushed happily. It is possible to rush happily, but there's a suffering there. There's a dukkha there. And so turn toward it. What is it moment to moment that is my experience? And I just, somehow acknowledging my sensitivity and seeing it that way, it causes a shift. Just like you said, happens in your body. There's a kind of shift when you don't see unpleasant sensation as a problem. There's also a shift that happens more broadly when you don't actually see your sensitivity and the way that it's not quite fit for the world we've designed as a problem. Just actually see what it is moment to moment. It's a powerful thing. So thanks for asking the question. I think that's a really good question to go here.
Thank you.
And I'm sure I'm talking to many people in the class who experienced something similar. So Ellen.
Hi. Yeah, I think I'm one of these people who's relating to this right now. I just wanted to kind of say, and maybe there's a question in here of I'm finding this pretty confusing and pretty challenging mentally to like figure out what this is like. Well, your answers to these questions tonight are it's like really helping, but I found myself really relating to your talk from last week and your answers from last week about feelings of grief and anger. Like I can really connect to what those feel like and what they can mean when I look at them and interrogate them and sit with them. That's something I get like a lot out of. But then tracking thoughts and physical sensations, I can't totally like stay with it because I don't know, I think I'm getting frustrated or something.
Uh-huh.
So,
And so the frustration is happening because, do you have any sense of what's frustrating about it? Do you feel like you can't do it?
I think I want like to know like why I
Yeah,
should do that. Yeah.
yeah,
And I'm getting like little tastes and it's super helpful, but I
yeah.
want like to get excited.
All right. So we'll talk of it in terms of emotions. So what might sound like an exercise of actually going through the body and feeling it rather than as a body, but as a conglomerate of sensations that are constantly changing. It may not be obvious, but there's a kind of a transfer of that skill. You're actually developing a skill in the mind to see the moment to moment. Let's say, you know, let's say your partner says something and you have a reaction to it. There's something about actually having stayed, even with the breath moment to moment, that allows more space to suddenly break in and to notice, oh, I'm getting defensive. It's such a powerful thing in the midst of a reaction to actually have the space to say, oh, this is a reaction. And so that space comes from this moment to momentness, the development of vipassana, development of clear seeing. You're actually seeing what conditions what. Another example, too, is for example, many people notice their anger, but what they don't notice is the feeling that came right before they got angry. There's usually something that comes, somebody makes a remark, say, and there's a feeling right before the anger. Many people don't notice that because they don't notice the moment to moment. And so there's a possibility that you might actually notice that. And I can give you the answer of what it's likely to be, but maybe it's more fun not to. Just turn to that. What is that that's felt before anger comes up? What is that right there? So again, it might not seem like the most fun to notice thoughts arising, but there's something that builds from this. The other thing is, to begin to see the characteristic of a thought as not being self. It's really helpful for example, with a fearful or an angry mind. To just, because if you see your fears as yourself, you're going to defend them. Of course, I should be afraid here. Why aren't you afraid? There's this identification with them, and so there's this added kind of energy. So just noticing thoughts, and fears involve thoughts, anger involves thoughts, beginning to see how they arise just of their own, and they're somewhat impersonal, might make it just easier for you once in a while to see that was just a fearful thought. and not grab it, not run with it, you know, or that was an angry thought and not grab it, not run with it, not identify with it. It just makes it more possible that that's going to happen. There's one other thing I was going to add in there too. So there's the not self characteristic that you begin to attune to. The other is the impermanent characteristic of things. And so sometimes you can see this in a really gross way, that you're like totally angry with someone and seeing them in these categories. And perhaps you're even like telling them these judgments and categories you have for them. And then once the nervous system is shifted, you realize you were saying a lot of stuff that you actually don't think, you actually don't believe, isn't actually true. And it was all just kind of coming out of your mouth because the state was driving it. You know, the state put you into this perception, but then you're not in it. And so you see it differently. So you begin to get in a really deep way, not just intellectually, but in a deeper way, that these states are impermanent. They're not forever. And the perceptions that drive them are not necessarily true. They're actually, you know, if I can say, the mind's job, as far as I can discern it, the mind's job is to offer all of these potential kinds of understandings and way things are going together moment to moment. It's constantly doing that. And so when it's driven by a really aversive state, it takes all of the stuff and it puts them together in a really aversive way and makes something look just as bad as it possibly can and justifies whatever it is that, you know. And so when that state kind of falls apart, suddenly those perceptions, they aren't arising and they don't look as true, you know. That's take being in love, to put it in a more positive term, you know. When one is in a state of being in love, then you're like taking all of the evidence and you're putting it together in a certain way that feels really good and really positive and so forth. It's also state driven, you know. Unfortunately, you know, I wish we could live in that constantly. And I think, in fact, we can if the mind is pure enough, if we go through purification process, but at least in the normal way that people do it, it's temporary and it's not, you know, it's a perception. So is this helping? Is this motivating you at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your examples are really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you.
Right. You're welcome. I mean, Buddhism puts these kind of little labels on it, which are very helpful. Again, they're just concepts, but impermanence and not self are two really helpful things to begin to discern, you know, those qualities and experience. And then the third one, there are three of these characteristics. The third one is suffering. Actually see suffering when it's happening as just suffering. So very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Stephen.
You brought up intention, Mark, and in my practice, when I remember to be mindful of intention in going through the day, I find that I notice, I can recognize thoughts that I label as conditioned thoughts. And it's been really helpful to be able to let go of them right then and there.
Yeah, if you see them as conditioned, if you see them as arising on their own, based on past conditioning, it's easy to let go of them because you haven't claimed them as yourself. You haven't identified with them.
Yeah. Um, and the reason why I identify, well, no, the reason why I can recognize them as conditioned thoughts is because before that, I've reacted to them. And I often become mindful of reactions and then reflect on, you know, what they're about and what caused them, and go back to the original thought that showed up and realize that was a conditioned thought. The reaction was something I've been repeating my whole life, and I don't need to do that anymore. So when I recognize a conditioned thought and let it go, it's an accumulation of the experience of suffering and recognizing it and then letting it go.
Beautiful. Yeah.
It's been very helpful. And so what I do is I repeat my intention many times a day, as often as I can remember to, because it's very effective when I do that. And
what is your intention? What do you say to yourself is your intention?
My intention is to be mindful and to recognize thoughts when they show up.
Okay.
And if that doesn't happen, recognize feelings and reactions when I react to them, and then stop and breathe and slow down and find the source of that reaction and reflect on that.
All right. Great. Sounds like very, very helpful stuff.
And thank you for putting those thoughts in my mind.
All right. That's my job. That's part of what a Dharma teacher does, is put thoughts in people's mind. Skillful thoughts, hopefully.
Yes, thank you.
All right. You're welcome. All right. Who else here would like to show up on the screen? I'm going to mute you, Steve.
Oh, thank you.
Has his hand up.
Hey, Doug.
Has his hand up. Yeah.
Who has his hand up?
I have my hand up, Mark.
Oh, there you are. Okay, Tom.
Yeah. My reaction bar is not lighting up tonight. Sorry.
Okay.
I have been using a lot my tinnitus as my breath and my candle in an attempt to work with it. And it's just kind of I guess, a pragmatic thing, but I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that.
I don't know if I have any thoughts about that. Is, what I would notice is if there's like, what's the intention? Maybe that would be my question. What's the intention in shifting to that as the focus?
It occurred to me a while back that my tendency was to kind of try to push it away.
Okay.
And obviously, it's not something that can be pushed away. It's something that I have to live with.
Yeah.
And so I wondered what would happen if I spent time with it. I believe that it helps.
Yeah.
I can't say for certain.
Not sure. But you think that you're noticing more acceptance because you're actually turning toward it. So that sounds skillful to me, to turn towards something you normally avoid, that you normally have aversion toward. Similar, like the instruction during the meditation, if there's something in the body that's unpleasant, to see if you can actually just open to feeling it as, without resistance. So that would be, part of your experience with the sound happening, is to find in what it is to not resist it in those moments. The only thing that maybe occurs to me is, you've noticed one problem is that if something is bothering you, you can avoid it, you can turn away. Another problem is that the mind tends to get obsessed about the thing that's bothering you too. It's one of the reasons I like the body scan, is because it treats the body all as equal. And we tend to get like obsessed about the places in our body that hurt, or that have a special meaning of some sort to us. And so by the quality of the body scan kind of opens us up energetically. That's what I notice, is when you do that, you open up energetically. So you might kind of play with this a little bit too, without necessarily turning away from, without avoiding the sound that's going on. Can you just like go down through the body and give your attention to each part and just have that be a part of the experience? Can it, so kind of keeping it moving a little bit, not just that one thing. And let me know how it goes. Let me know what you notice.
Thank you.
All in the interest of kind of like non-aversive kind of noticing of your experience. All right, so we are at our time for tonight, and so I will see you next week. Keep practicing and keep reporting when you come back what's going on. Thank you.